I would like to begin with a short prayer. God, we are truly thankful that your Spirit knows no boundaries and can unite us here in this meeting and can unite us with the children we serve, even outside of an atrium. We ask you to be with us all, with those children we'll be working with. We ask you to show us how we can do this well, how we can serve you well and serve the children well as catechists without much of an atrium. Amen. Terry, you want to mute yourself? I'm going to keep asking people to do that. So our little panel will be speaking for the next hour and a half. We will be having a conversation in front of you and interrupting each other freely. We do invite you to use the chat box if you need a clarification of something we've said, if you have a question about something we're talking about, or something helpful to type to the group. And whichever ones of us are not speaking, we'll be kind of monitoring the chat box as well, so that we can pick up on questions as they come. So that's how you are invited to participate in this conversation. We are not going to try to give you detailed notes on how to do this. We're trying to do a kind of an overview, a big picture to help you get started. We will refer to things like the theory of the Montessori method that will be useful to us without explaining all that theory, because we're assuming that you have those pieces in place. So we're just kind of rearranging pieces on the board of our catechesis work and hoping that you can follow that. Our goal today is to communicate a strategy and some good options for serving CGS children with distance learning. And the distance learning will include recordings for little children, especially Zoom or other live meetings with older children, and communications via email, either to prepare children or prepare parents for the time that we'll be spending with their children. I want to start with just 3 statements that are sort of an overview of what we have sort of gathered in our previous 2 meetings as starting points for working with different ages of children. So the exception to these 3 statements is going to be celebrations, which can cross all the planes of development that we're working with. But assuming that you're working within one plane of development, for 3 to 6-year-olds, what seems to be best is to work with parents and empower them or enable them to present to their children at home or to watch a presentation with their child that has been provided. So they can use resources that we provide, which might be a very short presentation of a material or part of a lesson. It might be a short, a recording of a song. It might be a little script or a little step-by-step, what you can do with your child so that they can choose the best time for their family and their own child to work their way through the resources that we would provide. With 6 to 9-year-olds, we are finding that a live presentation with a small group of children, maybe 3 to 5 children, on Zoom and suggested related work at home is useful. This will help to meet their social needs of being together, as well as their the needs they have for the materials that we're presenting. With 9 to 12-year-old children, we're thinking of live Zoom gatherings of up to 6 children. These aren't hard numbers, but ones we've found useful, with work preceding the gathering, so they can do a little research and share with each other. So you can take a lesson and break it up in some various ways, and then let them give the lesson to each other. They are much more interested in what they have to say to each other than in what I have to say to them. And so I don't want to be the only talking person in the gatherings with the older kids. As I was thinking about this over the last few months, really since March, I began to realize that it's really important not to leave our Montessori theory behind. And so just because we've left that environment that we've prepared, the atrium environment, doesn't mean we can forget about the planes of development, doesn't mean that we need to be careful in our choice of words with children, doesn't mean that we won't have a point of interest. So all those things that you have in your theory notes in your albums should be transferred, if possible, to your consideration of working online. So it's not a question of abandoning Montessori and saying, now I have to use a different method, but of thinking hard about how this piece of theory can be incorporated into what I'm doing with children. And I think most important of all these is to work with the developmental characteristics of the child under 6 and the child over 6. You have a pretty hard line there. And if you're trying to cross it, you're going to find yourself saying too much for 3 to 6-year-olds or too little for 6 to 9-year-olds, or you're not giving the 6 to 9-year-olds the opportunity to have a shared reflection that is so typical of their work. Oona. Oona is our 3 to 6 expert from Christian Family Montessori School. She's been our lead catechist there with about 50 children a year for 14 years? No, she's been there 14 years. So do you want to jump in here with talking about the 3 to 6-year-olds, Oona?
Yes, I hope you can see me. It doesn't show my screen. So for the 3 to 6-year-old child, you probably already know that this time period in their lives is marked by learning through their 5 senses and absorbing information in that way, so that direct instruction isn't always the way to reach them. They have sensitive periods for different characteristics, such as order, and they have the religious capacities for love, wonder, essentiality, joy, and prayer. So to keep these in mind as you're working with them online, it's very challenging with this age to really engage the 5 senses online. But sometimes the recordings that you come up with can instruct the parents to do something in the home that will capture the senses. So keep that in mind.
Anna, you want to move us on to 6 to 12?
Somebody had to forget to unmute themselves, right? Had to be brief. So yes, moving into the second plane, the 6 to 12-year-old. As we know, the absorbent mind is replaced. It's replaced with a reasoning mind. And some of those sensitive periods that were so strong in the first plane, some of those over time seemingly disappear. But we see what we see a child that Montessori called the new child. So a child who has capacities for moral development, social development, and intellectual development. The intellect that is fed by the flames of the imagination. So we see with these children also a new spiritual capacity, and that is to contemplate the mystery of time. This was that idea of time was not something that the younger children had. Being that they were such concrete thinkers, they were not able to begin to contemplate this idea of time. But now with our second plane children, we are initiating them into that mystery of time. So, you know, that's a huge piece of the work that we're doing with the second plane. And then moving into this idea of universal communion. So the kingdom of God, looking at it from even a broader viewpoint than what we have done before in the level 1.
In addition to paying attention to what plane of development the children are in, who are in front of us, we have to think about the ways the child learns. And Montessori really focused us on the hand. But work with Linda Allen, I don't know if, I think some of you may know her, who worked very well with children with disabilities, kept saying to me, there's 3 ways information gets to a child, and there's 3 ways a child expresses themselves. And one is visual, one is auditory and speech, and one is movement, you know, kinesthetic. So they can express themselves through their movement, and they can learn through their movement. And so I've been aware of how lovely the catechesis is for reaching children whatever way their main learning style is and their main way of expression is. They can use their ears, they can use their eyes, they can use their bodies, they can favor whichever one they want as they continue with their work. So I just want us to think for a minute about when we're working online like we are right now, we can be aware of how we're using our speech, right? And how the children can speak back to us. We can be aware of what we're putting in front of them visually. And if you look at the many backgrounds possible, and I'm sure you've seen thousands in the last few months, you know, what is that saying to the child? Can we isolate it more? Can we make it simpler? Can we really give them a focus that they need on the one thing you're talking about at any given time? Is that possible? And then can the child communicate visually back to us through their body language, through their expressions, through maybe something they write or art that they do. And this again varies from age to age group, but there's a lot of communication going on, especially with older kids, that you may or may not be aware of when you start working with 9 to 12-year-olds who know these platforms better than I do. And then finally, kinesthetic. You know, I learned from a singer that if you're singing with a group of children and you direct, you can unmute yourselves and sing together, because the visual direction is what pulls the group together. If you start singing, then they all start singing. It sounds like a joyous mess. But if you direct, you can sing together. So there's a movement, right? We can do gestures together. We can offer each other peace. We can try namaste or something else. We can do some of the movements, some of the signed songs, you know, that are in Sing with Joy or Songs of Love. And so movement can be incorporated on the screen on your time together, as well as suggestions sent home for their ongoing work. Anna, talk about the preaching voice.
Before Anna goes, we have a question from Maureen. She wants to know if we choose to use music, can we use music from the music book, which I assume is Sing with Joy, or Songs of Love. Is this allowed due to copyright?
Well, that's a good question. So if you're singing, that's fine. If you're playing the recording, that has not been liberally opened up. I think if you're doing private, unrecorded meetings with 3 or 4 children, I don't have any problem with that. And most of us, I think that's our plan, is not to use any, not to record or distribute any recordings of our work with children. Gerard Pottebom is the publisher of those 2 songbooks, and this summer he is moving everything in his whole shop into digital print or digital recordings. And so I'm waiting to hear that that has been done, so we can begin to renegotiate either, permissions, or, parents downloading this music easily. Nobody even has a CD player anymore. So we want to get this music digitally accessible. So I'm hoping that will happen soon, but right now I don't think it's available that way.
So just to clarify, something that I did was sing the songs from those songbooks and record myself singing them, and I think that's okay. And if the parents want to know the words to the song, if you just type the words up, that's okay. But if you photocopy the page from the songbook, then you have to get permission for that. So it's just about creative ways of sharing those songs with the families that aren't giving them what's in the songbook.
And I see Elizabeth asked about a church's license, and I'm not a church, and I don't have a license, so I don't really know how that works. So that would be, if you can work it out with Gerard, with Treehouse Communications, by all means. Yeah. Okay, Anna.
So when we are speaking to the children via any of these video platforms, we might need to speak to them in a different way than we would if we were in the atrium. So I used, when we were preparing for this, I used a term that Anne Garrido taught me a few years ago. We were recording some talks that we were giving for a workshop that was traveling the country at the time. It predated webinars and that sort of thing. But when we were all giving our talk in a preaching lab at Aquinas, and she told me to not use my catechist voice, to use my preaching voice, and that I needed to work on developing a preaching voice. So I think that with our, when we're working online like this, that it's, that soft voice doesn't always pull the children in like it might if we were face-to-face in person. And sometimes they can't even hear. Another thing I've learned is that the audio on Zoom flattens all the sound to make it more accessible. And so that's another issue with singing and with speaking as well, that it automatically tries to flatten all the audio.
And then, Anna, you want to move us right into grace and courtesy, because we have found that there is a great need for grace and courtesy as another of Montessori's many gifts to us.
Yeah, so that was something that I quickly learned when my class went on to Google Classroom very abruptly from in-person class to going to the platform of Google Classroom, but using the entering into a video call or a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet. We need to have a set of norms that the children agree to. And with the older children, with the second plane children, it's better if they create the norms, just like it is within the regular Montessori classroom or the atrium, because there's usually more buy-in from the children if they help to create. Because it was something new, though, for most of us back in the spring, I think everybody had to go through their having fun and silly stages with it, and even some of the parents were like that too. But you know, some of the norms that need to be looked at. How are we going to enter into this video call? Are we going to start out with everyone unmuted and greeting each other and saying hello? And then are we going to then everyone decide, you know, at a given time, we're all going on mute unless it's your turn to speak? How do we indicate a desire to speak? So sometimes, you know, are we just going to raise our hands, or are we going to use the little hand icon that we have as a reaction, having that as something that we would share with the children? How to come to a lesson and how to behave in the lesson. You know, the making funny faces and that sort of thing. I mean, they had to get it out their system. You know, are we going to come to the lesson and eat? Or we, you know, is that a norm that's important to us, that we're not going to be eating while we are in the lesson? Or is it a communal time where perhaps, you know, that would be okay? How to say goodbye to each other, how to end the call. And with the older children, how to use the chat or the text feature. Because I found with 6 to 9-year-olds, frequently until we addressed it, and at first I didn't want to, I wanted them, because they missed each other so much, I wanted them to be able to communicate with each other, but it was becoming that the chat was the most important thing. And so having to maybe say, you know, what are we going to put in the chat bar? Questions or comments, but it's not a time to be saying hello and that sort of thing. Or reminding the children too that other people see what they're doing. It's you know, I think for young children that we're talking to elementary age, the second playing child, I don't think sometimes if they've been doing something somewhat inappropriate, that other people are seeing it, not just the person they're doing it towards. So just part of that grace and courtesy. I think there needs to be a little bit of grace and courtesy with the parents as well, just so that the parents are aware that what they are doing and saying, I think they get oblivious to the fact that they are also often on the call or screen, whether they mean to be or not, but an awareness when it comes to that as well. And then we, just like we prepare the environment in our physical atria, we also want to prepare the environment for our digital work. And I think Davette was going to talk about that.
Except I don't see Davette, so I don't think she's here yet. Are you here, Davette? Oh. Hi.
I joined late. I apologize. I was at a budget meeting. So we are checking up here. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, for you all who don't know me. And we have level 1, 2, 3 and a toddler group. We've been meeting online since March, and we will be meeting online for the foreseeable future. We're not going to go back to intern worship. And so my sound is really bad. You know what? This is another Zoom thing. So this is why we're teching up. You need if you're going to meet online with kids, I didn't set up all the mics and everything. Some technical things to think about. We just finished the toddler training online. How much bandwidth do you have? How fast is the internet? Will the kids logging on have broadband or no? It makes a huge difference. We did an internet speed test here. It's variable. At home, I've got fiber optic, whiz-bang internet. It's 5 times as fast as church. So, real life things to think about if you're going to do this. If your internet crashes, do you have contact for kids that they can go to later after your Zoom meeting? Whether that's sending stuff home. We have a family portal where families can log in at any time and pull down CGS information. So if their internet crashed, it's not like they missed completely Sunday. Very good environment. You want to think about if you're going to just have a conversation with the kids, or if you want to share a material with them. And so if you want to share a material, think about can you in, or I was going to share this material. Sometimes I just hold up things for the kids. Right. This is Good Shepherd, which we're about to send home. CGS in a box for all of our families until Lent. So what I'm doing right now is getting all that ready, and September 13th, which would have been blessing of the backpacks and all that, the families are all getting CGS materials in a box to have at home, all levels. And basically it's supporting prayer. For level 1, what's the most important? Good Shepherd prayer. So I'm working on that right now. So that we talked about the hand, we talked about the kids wanting to be experiential, that Anna talked about the older children needing to be in charge. So think about your space, whether you're doing this at home. I did Pentecost at home. It wasn't up at the church. We're locked out of our buildings, but the bishop finally allowed us to come back to the building. So where will you be? Will you be at home? You have like a Zoom room at home where you can set stuff up. Will you be in your church building? Will you be doing a hybrid sort of thing where maybe you have church or mass once a month? So think about when you're going to teach the children, and within your environment, try to be very fair and more essential. Our favorite word. You might not be able to lay out all 10 extensions to a presentation. On Zoom, attention span is shorter, so you can just read the gospel or whatever is attached to the lesson, and give the children something hands-on to do later by themselves. Our Zoom session is 45 minutes with a level 1. Yes.
I want to back you up a little bit. Someone wants to know what you're sending home in those boxes. I'm wondering if that's a list you could get to
I can
us.
What we're sending.
And
nice. The list is dependent on what I have in my closet.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, we'll give us a place to start if you can share that. Also, your voice is going in and out a little, and I don't know why, because you're not moving.
I'm going to get a microphone since we're on for 90 minutes, but I can send Catherine the list. This darn machine, I hate it. I am zoomed out, y'all. So I will share the list, and for example, level 1, what I have right now, prayer card making kit with all green, because we're green until Advent, you know, various little scrapbook papers, a calligraphy pen for the parent, some digital copies of, what do you call it, stock photos and things, so that they can make prayer cards. That's going to be in a Ziploc baggie. I'm going to send home the color green for their table. So I have satin ribbon that we're going to use for the colors of the table. They're all getting a battery light, so they can set up their own prayer table. They're all getting a Good Shepherd with these. But I'm going to send, this is my color copied level 1 Good Shepherd. And I'm going to send home the color copy sheet with a sheet of styrofoam, like, I don't know, 8 by 10. And I'm going to tell them, get an X-Acto knife and have a party. So I'm not going to make it for them. I'm going to give them the things to make it. And if someone is really hopeless and they destroy it, I might send them one. It's also a way of integrating the family. You know, it's a family project to get our church together, because our church, for all intents and purposes, is at home. So I intentionally don't want to do everything. I'm going to send a sample prayer card. I'm going to show a picture of what this is supposed to look like, right? So that they can assemble it amongst themselves. So the response of the child is art. So for our toddlers, I'm sending home tempera block paints, a set of primary colors, going with a Montessori thing, red, yellow, blue, and white. So they can mix colors and they can explore with that with their parent. That's for the toddlers. The toddlers will also get the Good Shepherd and the light, right? We're also doing geography in the fall, Land of Israel, right? So I'm going to do something similar with the Land of Israel puzzle map, so that they can have that at home. Just something fun, okay? We're going to send home music, lyrics, like Oona said, so that they can sing at their own time. For level 2 and level 3, we're on, you know, the Kingdom of God and the blue strip. So I have for level 2 right now, they're going to be able to finger knit their own fatucha. So I have the yarn, or they can crochet. Handworks from the atrium, particularly level 2 and 3, your handwork shelf. Now is the perfect time for kids to be able to use those skills from the atrium. We're going to send them the masters from Center for Children Theology, the calligraphy sheets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, order paper, right? What else is in there? They're going to be able to make their own finger labyrinths. I just copied them, and I got gravel from the fish tank kind of gravel, you know, little tiny gravel, so they can make their own finger labyrinth. It's box, paper, and cardboard. So we're trying to keep it very inexpensive. They're also going to get the calligraphy pen set so they can copy like the math systems. We're going to send them paths for the Bible, because at the beginning of the year, what is the Bible? You know, finding books in the Bible. So with the geography, like Catherine has the mapping with the Bible verses, look up, so I'm talking level 2, where you can find the place and match it to the scripture. So they're going to have something like that. So level 3, we're on creation, minute kids, and Exodus.
Your voice is out now.
My voice.
Your microphone is failing.
Might be also my internet failing, because Case is here, so my rector is here. Both of us are on the internet. He's probably on Zoom too.
Well, let me break in here and just say, when we talk about environment for this kind of work, we're talking about an environment that we're sitting in that will be on screen, okay? So what's behind you? What earrings are you wearing? Whatever. You know, you want to make sure that you have a pretty clean environment for your own self.
Clean space.
Yeah. And also you can use screen sharing to put the Word of God right in front of children and get yourself out of the picture, and then share, or discuss that, or to put a picture of the mystery of faith, and then do the next one and the next one, so that their focus can be right on that and not on you as the catechist. We're always trying to get out of the way, and this is one way you might do that. And
right. So when I do a Bible study, I do that.
Yeah. And then you have to be aware of the child's environment at home. And this is where you can get some help from the parents to say, here's our meeting time, if there is such a thing. Can you make sure your child has a relatively quiet room? I'm fine with parents being present because it gives us all some safety. But, can it be quiet? Can they have a Bible? Can the surface be clear, where they're working? What are the things you would suggest that would help them to be aware that the place where their child is sitting becomes part of the environment and the lesson that they're participating in? So just think those things through. That will be part of your communication to your parents.
I want to add too that your session with the children can be your prepared environment too, that you can have an order that you follow each time you meet with the children that's familiar and recognizable, that they can come to expect and anticipate, so they can more fully participate in your sessions, and then also get that sense of order satisfied, and that sense of the relaxation that comes with that expectation. I know what's going to happen, so I can more fully be present right now. I'm not worried about what Miss Catherine's going to spring on me next. I know she's going to prepare.
What would be like? Are you talking about a meeting with one or two kids, a little lesson, that order for that
Well,
thing?
I think if you're having group sessions, I'm thinking more about the group sessions, but even the smaller group sessions or the one-on-ones, you could start each time with a prayer, and then you could move into the presentation, and then you could end with trying to hear from the child what their feedback is on what you just went through, like to have a very clear order of events. In the 3 to 6 year old child's classroom, that's what happens during the full school day from a school setting. They know, we start with this, next we move into work time, then we move into communal time. So they're used to having an expectation of an order of an event. And I think if you are meeting with them regularly, either in a large group, a small group, or individually, you can sort of replicate that and give them that sense of safety.
So for the next 15 minutes or so, Davette and Oona are going to focus on the 3 to 6 year old child, working with the 3 to 6 year old child. And then Davette, I know, has another meeting, and Anna and I will continue with the older child after that. So Oona and Davette, it's all yours.
Okay, I'm going to type in the chat, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my email, because I know the sound is terrible. I have to go to another meeting, so. Okay. Right. So for 3 to 6 year olds, hands-on, I heard experiential. So for example, Sunday, the gospel was, I forget, I had it wrong. So we did opening, chat, 5 minutes, light a candle, set the tone. What are we going to do today? We talked about movement, get them going. So we did an example. I don't know if y'all know the Julian of Norwich body prayer. So I did the body prayer with all the kids to get them going. It's a movement prayer. And then we talked a little bit about teaching a song. We'll go to breakout rooms, level 1 by itself with toddlers, if I have enough kids. The level 1 catechists will give their presentation, sing an atrium song. Then they join the main group for closing prayer. So we have breakout rooms for each group. For level 1, basically, if you have a material and they have the focus of the material, and you can film yourself, stream it, that would be wonderful. They love that. We do the Good Shepherd a lot, so I try to do their favorites. I'm not trying to keep a calendar of presentations. I'm choosing, what do you miss from the atrium? What would you like to see, right? So can we have the Good Shepherd? Can we light the candles, right? And then they'll sing a song, hop up, jump up, whatever. They have to be 5-year-olds. They have to be 3-year-olds. They like having their own time. And then we bring, they'll sing an Alleluia, right? Then we bring everybody back for a closing prayer with everybody together. But it's important for them to have their special time. The difficulty sometimes is that you have families sharing screens and they don't have a device for everyone. So what I do is take the level 1 children first, and then they have their presentation, we sing a song, and we say goodbye. And then that leaves that larger breakout room with the older children. So if you have a problem with children sharing devices or not enough devices, I always greet everyone, level 1 first, and then we say goodbye. So now in peace, and then I continue with the older children.
So
How long is that breakout session, Davette?
with the level 1?
probably 15 to 20 minutes, and then probably 10 to 15 minutes closing up.
Mm-hmm. And Oona?
I was just asking the same question. How long does she have with level 1?
So Davette is talking about a thing where she actually has 5 parishes coming together to serve in their group in Northern Virginia. And so all these kids come at the same time, and then they have these breakouts. But very few of us are in a situation like that. So Oona, maybe you want to talk about how you worked with different kids.
Well, I come from a school setting, and I have 2 primary classrooms that I work with. And we decided as a school that every other day we would have a large group meeting with each primary classroom, and that on Wednesdays, that would be my day to lead the large group meeting. And then in addition to that, I had what I called office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 2 sessions each day that people could sign up for, and those became small group sessions. I limited them to 6 children at a time. Sometimes they became one-on-ones if nobody else signed up. And then towards the end of the school year, I did start getting requests for one-on-one times with some of the children. So I did that too, in addition to recordings that we posted to Google Classroom. So it was a lot. I found myself, I'm a part-time catechist, but during this pandemic, I was working like 3 times as much as I did during a regular school year. And it was very challenging, but like I was saying to Catherine before, especially with our large group sessions, we did try to satisfy that sensitive period of order and have sort of an expectation of how our time together would go, what would happen first. And then the children were muted, and we would read a book or make some sort of presentation. And they raised their hands to be, if they wanted to speak, and we would unmute that particular child. We ended every large group session unmuting everybody and letting them all say goodbye to each other in a very exuberant way, because that, for a lot of them, they're not in the second plane of development yet, but their social needs are not being met right now by any stretch of the imagination. And that was just our little way of satisfying that need to connect with each other. I did find that refining the senses, like I said earlier, was very challenging during my time with the children without a little bit of help from the parents. So if I was going to, in my small group sessions, if I was going to do a presentation of a particular material, let's say, for example, the gestures, I asked the parents to get a plate and a cup in advance so that there was some experiential aspect to it, that it wasn't just me showing them something, that they were able to do it with me and they had something to hold in their hands. I did break up baptism into 6 different lessons, and those I wrote up for the parents to present to the child. And we decided that they could use lip balm to, you know, represent the oils that you anoint yourself with. And I directed them to set up the water so they could practice that. So that was a way of engaging their senses through parents. We did talk a little bit about essentiality. So sticking with Catechesis of the Good Shepherd materials and presentations. And like I said, thinking of presentations that the child can participate with you. Something that I've heard from several other catechists that is really important that we discovered is when you are doing a presentation, whether it is recorded or in real time with the children, to have the camera focused on the material, because that replicates their experience in the atrium with you. When you sit with them in the atrium or in a Montessori classroom, you're beside the child. They're not focused on you. They're focused on the material. So that can meet some of their sensitive periods that they have right now. I feel like I might be rambling a little bit, so.
It's all good.
Okay, did you find a good way to focus the camera on the material? I did not. It was very dramatic. If you saw me giving a presentation in my atrium, because I lived 2 blocks away from the school, so I was able to present in the atrium, I had stacks of books and stools and chairs and all kinds of things to try and get the camera to focus on the material. I had to do a lot of preparation beforehand to see what it would look like to the child. I know that Hallie talked a little bit about having an external camera or a document camera.
And she used a tripod, which she said are about $15 on Amazon, and then you can tip it, put your camera in there and tip it to the angle that you need. And Davette, what did you do?
You can get, if you have a DSLR camera, Zoom has, through Canon software, that you can hook up your DSLR and a tripod, and that becomes your camera for Zoom, which opens up a world of lenses and really getting in tight. If you just have a cell phone, you can, through Zoom, add a cell phone as a separate camera. And then Zoom will use your cell phone as a second camera, and that can be filming the materials. I've got a Samsung with an awesome camera, and we tried it, and it works. So you can use the cell phone, and you can get a mini tripod for $10 or $15 on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really just film the material, and then you tell Zoom you want to go back to your headshot, and then you switch the camera, right? If you're looking for a resource, I'll put it online. The Virginia Theological Seminary, the Episcopal Seminary, has a website. It's called Lifelong Formation, and they have a series of workshops about how to use Zoom and how to do presentations on Zoom. And it was meant for rectors who had to learn this overnight practically. And so they've got a lot of good resources. But absolutely, you want to focus on the material, not you, right? Someone mentioned the last call we had about they just focus on the candles of the altar. We'll let the kids have that moment of peace. They set up the altar, and then the final shot was of the candles. I thought that was beautiful. They don't want to see you, right? And so when I do shots, they're very tight to the material to replicate that child kneeling next to you. And even though they're not there, the effect is that they're right there with the material.
I'm glad you brought up silence to that. That was something that Hallie, the 3 to 6 year old Montessori teacher that presented in Catherine's last conversation, mentioned frequently, that to leave, not only in your presentation, to leave spaces for silence so the children have a chance to take in what you're showing them, but also for them to respond. But one of the people in our group session for Catherine's first conversation talked about what Davette was referring to, just recording an image of the candles and just having that show for like 1 minute or a minute and a half, and letting the child enjoy silence with a material that's very familiar to them from the atrium. I do think that silence is something we forget about with young children, but it's so valuable and essential for their development. So finding ways to celebrate that and encourage that in the home environment is really important.
I wanted to suggest that when you think about your time, if you normally have a 2-hour session with, you know, an additional hour before and after for your own work as a catechist to prepare and take notes, that's a 3-hour period of time. Well, you're not going to spend 2 hours online with anybody. So if you have 10 children or 15 children, think about, you know, 10 to 15 minute sessions with them that will be complemented by suggestions for work that they can do before and after that you have sent home to the parents. So you might still have a total 3-hour period of time of shorter meetings with more children, rather than get 15 children, you know, into one meeting and try to spend a longer time with them. And so the younger the child, the smaller the number of children and the shorter the amount of time that you're going to spend with them. And then with older kids, I've done up to 45 minutes with 9 to 12-year-olds. And that can be a bigger group.
Yes, I think with the 3 to 6 year old child, the shorter, we found the large group sessions to be valuable in terms of socialization, but for the younger children, they tended to zone out. And so the fewer children you could have, and really they would lose focus after 15 minutes, and trying to push past that just didn't work, especially over Zoom, where it's so easy for them to get distracted.
Davette and Oona, do you have any final words for us before we move on to the older children?
It's just important, even if you don't have to have a fancy setup, but if you could just reach out to your families. The children really need us, and even if it's just a check-in and how you're doing, and just light a candle, that's enough, honestly. And then you know, let other things happen as you are able, but it's just important to let them know that we love them and God loves them, and this too shall pass.
Thanks to that.
Thanks, Davette. How about you, Oona?
I'm not sure I have anything new to say. I do want to echo what Davette said, that they still need us. And even though it's challenging to find ways to engage with them, to keep trying different ways. If something doesn't work, try something else or tweak it, or but don't give up. Reach out for help as much as you can, because we're not in this alone. Everybody's, you know, struggling to reach the children that they work with, and sessions like we're having today can be really valuable. But if you have catechists that you either work with or that you know, reach out to them, and maybe they're struggling with the same thing, or maybe they've come up with this great idea that they could share with you that you wouldn't have known about if you hadn't asked for help. So don't try to do it all alone. That's all I would have to say.
Thanks, Oona. Hannah, we're up. Moving on to the second plane. Anna's going to start with the 6 to 9-year-olds, and we'll see what we want to add about 9 to 12-year-olds towards the end of that.
So just to also to put out there that most of my experience was with the Montessori classroom as opposed to the atrium. My atrium is in my parish, and I teach in a secular Montessori school. But that's definitely, there are plenty of overlaps. It's really important that we allow for that social interaction to happen, that recalling that the second plane child is in that period of social development. So it's really easy to get into a pattern of where the child is working alone at home, especially if the child is an only child. But how to get situations set up between the children that allows for that exchange of ideas, collaboration, and so forth. So usually 4 or 5 people at a time is a pretty good number to start with, because too many and the group dynamics thing starts happening where people are pairing off, but 4 to 5 usually can allow for that social interaction to happen. Also, knowing the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning and their pros and cons of each. So synchronous, what we're doing right now, where we're all in real time together, we're all in sync together, that works well for interactive type work. But everyone has to, the con of that is everyone has to be on the call at the same time. So we were not allowed to record any type of meeting that had children speaking in it. If it were just the adult talking and the children were muted, that would be okay to record. But we were never allowed to record any meetings with children speaking. The asynchronous would be pre-recorded presentations where people could just watch them on their own time, like on demand. And so it has the convenience factor where people can watch and participate when there is a time and space for it, and children can go back and repeat and listen and watch over and over again. Want to hear that one more time? But of course, that type of presentation is not interactive. It's more of a passive type of presentation to the children. We found, though, that a lot of our parents were very concerned about screen time. So we had done such a great job of trying to discourage screens at home that we had a lot of parents that were just really worried about screen time. And so the parents really wanted to be able for their children to have more analog type experiences with their learning. And so in addition to using the digital platforms, even using email communications, asking, kind of leading the parents through what they could be doing with the children instead. One thing that worked well for us, children recording themselves giving lessons, or even a lesson, or any type of presentation, a reading, a poem that they would like to share with the group. So that really helped with the part about missing each other, seeing each other. And again, time, this really depends upon the group, but just like in our face-to-face lessons and presentations, we know when to say when, and we always take the liberty to end gracefully when it's time to go. But according to most of what the group shared that would be in the level 2 sharing group, we agreed that around 20 to 40 minutes seemed to be about right for a time for level 2 children. Also, if the children are given something to prepare before the meeting time, they're more likely to engage in the work, as opposed to having the meeting time and then given the follow-up work. So kind of front loading the session. And I was actually sharing that with one of our catechists, and she does a lot of, as Catherine had mentioned this earlier, and she does a lot of work right now, and she's a PR person, and so she's doing a lot of Zoom work, and she said, I'm going to use that with my adult clients. I'm going to give them work to do ahead of time before they come to the session instead of afterwards. So one thing as we move into the fall, our approach to the great stories that we have in the atrium, the history of the kingdom of God, you know, how are we going to be able to give those impressionistic stories to the children in this setting? That's just a question to kind of live into. I don't know if we have any answers to that right now. Some of the challenges that groups faced in our collective group here, just challenges with technology in general. We've experienced a few of those in this very call. But also knowing that Zoom fatigue is a real thing, that our attention spans are usually less. And for some people, it brings out a certain silliness. They see their children, they see their face on the screen, and they want to start making faces and clowning around. We also, the group also identified that sometimes parents interfere with the Zoom meetings or the Google Meet meetings by trying to tell the children what to think, or even sometimes we've had one case of a parent being very disrespectful to the child in front of his or her peers. And then we know that our families can get overwhelmed with all the distance learning and digital platforms, and again, like I mentioned before, a resistance to having too much screen time as well. Some of the gifts that our group identified, the celebratory nature of prayer seems to come out, and singing. With the singing, the children are able to share the content of the subjects. It's a time to share the work of the family. Oftentimes families would get involved in something that a child would possibly just be doing in isolation in the atrium. It's a place for projects, like Davette showed us how she's sending home the media to allow the parents and families to help. Truly just empowering the parents to be the spiritual leaders of their household and in their homes in a way that possibly some of them that just dropped their children off 5 minutes before catechesis started before now have been charged and empowered to do this. It's also a time, sometimes we have these great ideas about something we would like to do with the children, but it's not necessarily an idea or a thing contained within the catechesis of the Good Shepherd. But it might be something that it's still worthwhile, like a study of different literature, children's literature, that kind of thing, that we would not do in an atrium setting. But because we are kind of working outside of that place, it's also a time to explore other themes that maybe we would do in a Bible school or vacation Bible school, that sort of thing. But it's that's also another idea, another gift that has come out of this experiment. And Catherine, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I was working with a group of 4 to 6 to 9-year-olds during the spring that had been meeting up until February. And we got no instruction even to continue from our school, but I missed the kids. So I finally wrote to all the parents and said, how about we get on at our regular time, but only meet for 45 minutes. And so we began to do that. And they really were happy to be together again. The prayer of the people, or the prayer of the faithful, seemed to be important to them, and we always ended with that. We may have had other prayers, but that was something they were consistently choosing in a way that helped them to get some of those social needs met. No child ever missed an opportunity to ask for prayers. There's a lot of things to be praying about these days, and they really appreciated that opportunity. The 6 to 9-year-olds were amazing to sing with. They did not want to mute. They wanted to hear everybody. We did not sing it all together. We were singing the same song. That's all I can say about it. But it was hysterical and very joyful. And they were having a blast. So we just continued with our very asynchronous singing. That was a lot of fun, but that seemed to be important to them too. They did like a few minutes of social time at the beginning, and that's where anything came out. If a pet had passed away or some concern, a baby was born in one household a couple weeks after we started, so that was pretty fun. So those things were nice to see. I had one child in the group who has fairly serious developmental disabilities, and I always sent everything ahead to her mother, and the mother could, like if we were doing a reading, I would have the reading broken into lines and numbered lines, either by verse or just 1, 2, 3, 4, depending. And this little girl could pick a line and practice it so that she could offer it, when we did the group reading. But having a screen share of a reading like that made it possible for me to say, okay, now look at verse 27, and it would be right there, and everyone could see it. So if they missed hearing it, it didn't matter. They were able to immediately re-engage and reflect on the reading. An example of a preparation that went pretty well was we did, instead of the gifts of the Spirit, we did the fruits of the Spirit for our Pentecost celebration. And this included love and patience and kindness and so on. And I just assigned them randomly to every child. I assigned one to each child, and I said, come to the celebration with a story or a Bible reading related to this gift. And so each child then had a turn to share what it was that they had found. And some of them drew something, and some of them said something, and some of them read something from the Bible. And it was amazing. It was so delightful. And of course, they were so interested in what each other had to say. And so if you can find a way to prepare for a lesson like the gifts, could you say, would you talk to your family about how minerals are gifts to us, and then bring that conversation to the reflection on the gifts, or bring your favorite example of an animal or a flower or a plant, so that they would come with something ready and not be scampering around looking for them, but each have something different to share. And some lessons will lend themselves to that in a nice way. My kids weren't, habitually they didn't do much work, after they left a session. And so they weren't in the habit of doing that with me, except when I asked them to prepare something. And so that seemed to be the best way to get work out of them was before the lesson rather than after it.
So we had a few questions in the group chat. One person, Karen, wanted to know from Anna, I think, what are some of the essential lessons that you've done with the level 2 children? And what would be the prepared items that you have them do ahead of time?
I haven't done that. Again, most of my experience with that sort of thing was in the classroom. And all of the work I did with the children in the atrium, it was more asynchronous learning of me or one of our catechists sharing with them from the prayer table. We had celebrations, but I did not send any work to them yet.
Mm-hmm. This kind of leads into the last part of this conversation we wanted to have, which was to say, okay, now what are you going to do, right? And I wanted to go back to Hallie's suggestion from the second conversation, which is to get out your table of contents. So this is what I did in the spring when I was ready to start meeting with the kids. I stuck with what we would be doing at that time of year, with the Easter season and Pentecost. I tried to choose some biblical things and some liturgical things, not just one or the other. With the 9 to 12-year-olds, I was finishing the Exodus, and so we did the typology work, as a close to the season, and we were bringing in liturgical things with that. But anyway, if you look at your table of contents, and especially if you can do it with your team so that you get some mix of ideas and skills, you can be looking, for example, at, say, the beginning of the year and saying to each other, okay, can we do a prayer table? Can we do the fettuccia? Can we do the altar? Whatever it is that are in those early lessons, and how can we do it? And there may be some where you just say, can't be done or can't be done this year, right? So it reminded me a lot of my first year as a catechist, where we were making material Sunday night or Saturday night to present on Sunday. And if I had the album page written, I was good to go. But I couldn't do everything that year. So I was a little selective and nice to myself about doing what was possible. And so you kind of have to go back to that mindset. You may be a very skilled and experienced catechist, but pulling this together does take time, as Oona was saying. It is hard work. And so So you may say to one catechist, could you pull together the prayer table and I'll pull together, something to do with, or could you write the things to the parents and I'll run the session? Like use your mix of gifts there to cover the bases. You really are doing a lot of parent education. Hallie said this as well for the Montessori work she was doing. And parents are more or less available for that. So don't send them long emails with 25 paragraphs, send them bullet points, send them something short, be concise, but, rich in what you send to them, so that they can get used to your communications and go right to what they need to know. So anyway, as you review that, you may say, okay, this would be good as a recording. This would be good as a synchronous presentation. This would be good with 1 or 2 children. I'll have to make appointments. Just start to break that out for yourself and let some things go and do what you can. Maybe you meet with them 3 weeks out of 4 so that you have a week of pulling things together for the coming month. In addition to how you want to present or share a lesson, you also want to be brainstorming about how the children can work with the lesson, with the ideas in the lesson. The leaven, which so many catechists hate to have in the atrium. Well, send that home. This is your chance for lots of experience in people's kitchens, which is much more manageable. So some things will lend themselves delightfully to being done at home. Some old children have technical skills that we don't. They can make movies, they can make presentations, as Anna was saying, and they're happy to do it. And so, do let them show off, in a sense. Some of that they can do a stop motion, is that what they call it? Little film of a presentation. That can be pretty effective, and then have the reading with it. So these are things I haven't tried yet, but these are things I'm, hoping to pull out for the coming year. When we did typology, I had, a sheet up where I could be recording their contributions, because that's always a conversation that I'm trying to let them say. And I was the only one that could type into it. Kids with iPads figured out a way to write with their finger right onto the document. Although if you move the document, the writing didn't move with it. And so it was a little wonky, and they could make it disappear. But if you can figure out a way to either make another child the note taker or let them each write their thoughts, they were very intrigued by that. And I felt like I had chosen the least good option for that particular lesson. I would like not to do that again if I can avoid it. I have seen some good ideas in the chat. We haven't gone through them all. Oona, did you want to pull out any?
Well, somebody just said something really lovely. Elizabeth said that they've been chalking each family's driveway. It takes about 3 weeks to do the full rotation, 5 or 6 children's family a week. They chalked Alleluia the first round and Shalom for now. That sounds really, really sweet to me. I have 50 children I work with, though, so not something I could do.
Situation is a very diverse, is a dispersed church. Like when I do this, it takes me 2 hours to do a quadrant.
Wow.
But I let the group of parents know that I'm coming, and it's actually really bonded the parents well. So I do that in like a Facebook Messenger group chat situation. And then when I get to the house, I say, I'm here to do your house. I text it. The family might come to the window and wave or stand on the front porch while I chalk, and we distance yell at each other. And then I text, if I didn't see the family, I text, I've done your yard. And then I go, and we're actually making a book of all of them. I photograph each one. And so now we have something positive out of Corona, and not just the idea that we haven't seen each other forever. So we were trying to work on community engagement, but our families are engaging each other much more frequently, we found, based on they all have a group chat.
Mhm.
Thank
And
you.
we haven't talked about using Facebook as another way for people to connect, but Anna did that with her class. Is that right, Anna?
I actually use Facebook a lot with my class, and it's our main medium in the atrium as well. So we have a closed Facebook group that all the parents and catechists are on, and it's a great way to share. It's a great way to share resources when parents are wanting to talk with their children about racism. They're wanting to talk with their children about all sorts of, like talking about the coronavirus. How did we speak to our children? So it's not just catechesis, it's more like family ministry. And that's what I'm using to read to the children. I read every night on Facebook Live. And that's been the literature piece that I was speaking of, that it's just reading children's books that allow for the children to find the message within the book. They're not necessarily religious in their theme, but they have wonderful life lessons in them. So I think I saw somebody was asking for a list of books, and I've got a lot of really good books, but I've been buying lots of new books as well, making sure that we are representing and elevating especially Black writers, making sure that that we are looking at a very diverse type of literature, as well as the people in the books. So that's been a real motivation, and within the last 6 weeks is making sure that we have those books represented in what we're sharing with our children.
So Anna, do the children have access to the Facebook group with the parents? Are they reading that too?
They just play. They don't read it, but the parents will play. Like, let's listen to Miss Anna read, And so they'll put it out. But our parish is using Facebook to stream the liturgies, so it's very low tech. It's easy to do, and you can use a cell phone.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And Anna, would you be willing to write up a list of the literature that you're sharing with your children?
Yes.
Thank you.
Be happy to do that.
So that's our last question. Like, there are a lot of resources. A lot of them are circulating already. Any resource list has to be curated so you get the best stuff rising to the top. I'm hearing, like we heard from Davette, we heard from Anna. I don't know if we can put anything together, if you feel like you have enough resources, if there's a particular type of resource you'd really, really appreciate at this point. What can I put on my website that would be useful to you, or the center website, I mean. And if any of you have anything to either type into the chat or say out loud, what would be helpful going forward, I would be curious to know that.
I did find Google Classroom to be very user-friendly.
I'm wondering, in the group chat, people were talking about level 3. Maybe we could come up with a group of level 3 catechists so we can share best practices with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on Facebook though, so if there's any other way to do that, I would appreciate it.
Just to share, there's a lot, because teachers are showing each other on YouTube how to do these things safely. And you can get a lot on YouTube about Google Classroom, making a closed Facebook page, how to use Flipgrid. There's a lot out there.
So Vicki, you're talking about, is there some kind of a way that we could have a level 3 catechist group? That's
Yeah,
either
just
online
some way that we could communicate with each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what I have right now is the collected addresses of everyone on this call. And I could send an email and say, do you want to be, do you thinking an email list or an occasional call? What would be useful, do you think?
Oh.
Catherine, if you created like a Google Groups through Google, and everyone's email can be on that, and everybody can be sharing.
Yeah.
And everybody would see it, you know, it's so
Yeah.
you don't have to be on Facebook.
Does that sound good, Vicki? I forgot about Google Groups. Yeah, they're useful.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. We will do that. For now, I'll start an email out with that specific question, but if you all use reply all and have other ideas you want to push forward, you know, we can see how we might help each other, you know, in an ongoing way through the year. But I don't want to overwhelm you, and I don't want to be sending out emails no one's going to read. So the more specific you can be, the better, I think.
At the beginning, when I think it was maybe Oona and Anna were talking about presentations and extensions and maybe sending out a list of those things, could that be sent out?
Are you asking for the ideal presentations that we were talking about?
The ideal presentations and like extension work, like what did you send home?
Yeah,
Those
I think that would be a really good resource for that too.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like she has a lot of things she's sending home right now.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, I'll try to get that out of Davette, and Oona, you can add to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll type up the presentations that were the most successful and that children could actively participate in.
That'd be nice, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, do you all have Zoom fatigue now? I don't know how to avoid it, but I think we have used our time pretty well, and I'm very grateful that you all were able to be here. And thanks for the ongoing input that we got over the last month from many of you that helped to make this a little richer than it otherwise would have been. So you all have the center email address. I'm happy to take emails and help you any way I can. I do a lot of that, and you have many of you have each other's addresses, so let's work together on this. Special thanks to Oona and Anna for their work on this.
Well, thank you for facilitating it too.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think this kind of intensive conversation is really valuable, and to have it spread over a whole month was really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a lot of thinking about this month. So now I'm ready to start.
So I think, Catherine, somebody asked about a recording of this conversation. Catherine, I know you are recording. Do you plan to share the recording like you did with Hallie's conversation?
Yeah, so what I've been doing with these recordings is people request them. I'm not making them public, but if someone says, can I see it? I can usually send a link. It won't probably be ready for a week because there's some uploading and things I have to do. But yeah, if you have a specific purpose for one or want to share it with somebody, I think this was benign enough that we could do that. All right, everybody, let's give each other a good piece.
And you can save the chat if you're on a Mac, which is what I'm on. I don't know how to do it on a PC. There's a little box that says File. And if you click on File, it opens up another, oh, actually it's next to File, I'm sorry. The 3 dots. If you click on that, then Save Chat comes out. And if you click on Save Chat, it will save the chat from this conversation.
I mean, it's the same way on a PC.
Okay.
Thanks, that's helpful. All right, people, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Wow.